I'm back with another tutorial because someone specifically suggested or requested that I lay out my process for like how I do the animatics and storyboards. I'm gonna focus on the storyboards for this session because animatics and storyboards I do differently. Storyboards are more, they look kind of more like this, and animatics are way more like finished usually for me. So, I put these storyboards through a different process than I did with animatics, to kind of break it down to the bare bones. I'll actually probably kind of go through a little bit of, like, I do have some animatic ideas, or storyboard ideas, so I might kind of try and draw some stuff, but I'm not at all ready to do the storyboard phase. But I'm just gonna wing it, because that's what I do a lot, is wing it. How I made stuff. My first goal was, how can I make this quick? So I actually started with I started with this. For the very first, here's how I think Rivet will be brought up storyboard. I started with this, and it evolved into, I can make a storyboard out of this. So it started off with a very simple, quick, easy art style. And, more lazily put together type of art style. So by the time that I got to, I think the first thing I worked on was this scene, specifically. And it should be pretty obvious because look at how I draw Pomni. But this was one of the first scenes that I had worked on because I wanted to actualize the idea. Because I had kind of spoke through it and I was like, I could actually make an animatic out of this. So I started actualizing the idea. I'm not a professional when it comes to storyboarding and stuff like this, but I do know some basic tips. Oftentimes what you want the focus of the shot to be, you want that to be like Pomni is fully colored white, whereas Ragatha isn't, because she's not the main focus where you're the viewer's eye is not going to go to Ragatha. So I gray her out a little more. I make her a little bit more darker, but I make her contrast from the background. And usually you can only do this if you have a gray background to work with to begin with, so ideally you kind of want somewhere around here kind of background, so then you can kind of play around with, it being lighter, it being darker, you have more playroom. So that's just a light tip, where if it's objects or something that is not of importance, I will color it a different color that is something that kind of falls into the gray background more. And over time, I learned, this is a good example, I really like how some of these characters are not fully, the line art isn't black, and it kind of helps blend them more into the background and keeps the eye more focused on Supal and Pomni, which are arguably the subjects of discussion in this scene. That's also another tip. And then with the angles, that was just something that I saw from a different storyboard that I was like, oh yeah, that would be what a storyboard is it's just blocking. I honestly probably put too many details in these storyboards anyways, but I'm getting a little off track. When it came to this storyboard, the way that I did it was, how quickly can I do this? So I basically threw it up. I just kind of threw something together. I did not sit there and be like, okay, now I have to draw Pomni, and then I have to draw over Pomni once I block her, and blah blah blah, and this is how I drew it. I didn't make a sketch and then clean up the sketch and then go to line art and do all, I literally just full send it. So that's kind of how I did some of these storyboards. And the way that I start off with these storyboards, first of all, again, layers, so many layers. So there's this layer, there's this layer, there's this layer. There's so many layers. These, I tend to pile everything into one canvas. So there's a lot of scenes in here. It's not a lot of scenes, but it's enough to be this is getting, usually when I get overwhelmed by the one canvas, then I'll make another canvas. How the process kind of goes. Obviously I have my dialogue to go off of. I have to have a very specific image in my head. So what I'll typically do when I'm storyboarding, and it's not a great method, but it's the method that works for me, I'll record the audio, edit the audio, and then I will put that audio in a project, like a video project, and I will just replay the audio, and especially replay certain sections, and try and picture what I have for the scene. So a lot of this was like already idealized before I started, like I have to see it in my head before I actually put it down on paper, kind of thing. And then I would do that with scenes that I could easily picture, and then I would save the harder to picture ones for later and kind of like, you know, adapt it to what I already had. So I'm very scattered when it comes to what I work on, because I jump around a lot. So like sometimes I'll work at the beginning of the animatic, sometimes I'll work way at the end, sometimes I'll work in the middle, sometimes I'll go to the semi-middle, sometimes I'll go way to the start. It's a very scattered process. That's essentially the process of this specific type of storyboarding that I do. These aren't even in order. I do try and make sure that everything's off of, like the line art is separate from any coloring, and the coloring is separate from anything else, so I can go back and edit it easier if I need to. Sometimes I will use like squishy frames. The best way I can describe it is squish frames, where I'll take a drawing, merge the two layers together, and then copy the drawing on merge, and then paste it on a new layer. And then what I'll do, it's actually what this layer is. It's just enough to kind of animate it a little bit. For certain scenes where I wanted to emphasize an action, I would do that. I don't do that super often, but I found that that was something that I could do that kind of would help emphasize certain actions. Then when it came to backgrounds, most of this is not on the same layer. A lot of this isn't on the same layer. So like Kinger is on one layer. Some layers have Kinger and Jax, but like for the Kinger eye animation, he's all on different layers, so I could better kind of manipulate that. Jax is on a different layer, so I could better manipulate him. And yeah, a lot of the coloring is like on different layers. I work very haphazardly. I hope I make that very obvious. And then sometimes I will group certain things together so I can just bloop. But see, I don't even, some stuff I didn't plan for, so I had to improvise and make new layers. Like I didn't realize Jax like moves his hands and stuff. So I did this. Kinger must too, apparently, because I don't know why that... Oh yeah, he does. Because he has to get into the cart. But there's a lot of stuff that I did, like, you know, I work very haphazardly, so it's like I'll draw some of the stuff, realize that I need to change it, and then do stuff like this. But yeah, like typically, a lot of it is like line art will be on a separate layer, and then, like these are on a separate layer. Apparently the lights are on a separate layer as well. Because the more layers that I have, and I said this in my first tutorial, the more layers you have, the easier it is to fix something if you notice a mistake. So ideally, you know, with certain things, you kind of want to make sure if there's stuff overlapping, is usually when I am really like heavy on a lot of layers, because like if I had all of this merged into one layer, that would be a nightmare to fix in the long run. But yeah, my process typically consists of like, get the audio recorded, edit the audio, put that in a project, just repeat the audio so I can keep the picture in my head and images in my head, and whatever I picture first, whatever scene I can like play out in my head first, that is usually what I work on. And if there's multiple instances where I can like picture the scene, then I just go ahead and do what one I want to do more, like do whatever scene I want to do more. I just try and picture, especially with like TADC, because I have a frame of reference, I try and picture what I think the show would do with some shots. Like this scene specifically, I guess. Like that's what I picture TADC would do. And the hardest thing with me, with this animatic though, I think it's in a different thing. I had a really tough time with the Kinger scene because I pictured a lot of the same scene. So I tried to kind of push for different angles and stuff, and I even like after the fact thought of new angles, but I was like, no, it's too late, I'm done. So like, you know, I never did like a, you know, like above camera shot looking down, which I think would have been an interesting scene to do. Yeah, there, like if I can't picture something, it's really hard for me to actually follow through with it. So I kind of just threw up the Kinger and Jax talk at that point. Like this scene was like, what's a different angle I could do instead of another Kinger close-up? Because I would picture a camera change, but I couldn't figure out how the camera change would go. Like a different camera angle. Really utilize like camera is down looking up, camera is up looking down, camera is showing a profile of a character. I don't know, like for me, like I do it in a way of like, what would I watch? Like how would this realistically be storyboarded? So I do stuff in that way where I try and picture like the more realistic way it would look. And if your skill level doesn't match, that's okay. My skill level doesn't match a lot of perspectives that I tried to pursue, and then sometimes you do stuff and then you find out you can draw that. And a lot of it, you know, like with this, you can see the blocking for perspective. Even if, like with storyboards, it doesn't really matter as long as there's enough context given. Like if you were to do this professionally, it really doesn't need to look good, it just needs to make sense for the animators. So yeah, essentially this is how I storyboarded it, and I was like, well, I can just, you know, do it this way and it'll make sense. So yeah, I'm not really sure what other advice I can give because a lot of this is just like frickin' eyeball. Yeah, that's how I storyboard for the most part. For more complex stuff like this, obviously I try and utilize more unique camera angles, more unique perspectives, unique poses and stuff. Just whatever I picture, I draw, and then I usually try and take the lazy way out, because these do take a lot of energy for me, specifically. But anyways, that's my storyboard process. Ultimately, it just boils down to whatever works for you. Because a lot of it's just like, I like this, I'm gonna do it this way. Like the only reason I picked this specific brush, Elphinstone? I don't know how you say that. The only reason I picked that specific brush was because I thought it gave like a storyboard feel. And then the only reason I picked this color for the background is because I like the color blue. So it really just boils down to what works for you and what you like. But like, I'll just go ahead and like do a quick like how the storyboard worked for me. How I did like an image art frame. So like, obviously layers. I do it very quickly, I throw it up, I don't try and think too much about it. So because again, the only thing that's really gonna matter is if you're able to convey what the scene is trying to say. Right? So that's the only thing that's going to matter in the long run. So it doesn't need to be pretty. If you want to make it pretty, you're allowed to make it pretty. But especially like after watching like the official storyboards, my thought was, oh, I'm being way too picky. Because the point of storyboards is just to throw up a concept. I do actually have specific colors that I use. Actually, that's even still... Then we'll do... And this is a part of a storyboard concept that I thought up. I don't know if I'll use this. Did I just sing the McDonald's? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Guys, I don't know what's wrong with me. Sometimes if I am having a difficulty with a scene, like I'm having right now, trying to draw a bucket, I will go through the effort of doing like a rough sketch and just block it, and then go back over it to kind of clean it up and make it make more sense. Like, I'll probably do that, but this is typically what I do. Because actually, okay, you know what? E-A-B-A-E-A. I want him to look more like he's kind of like... Well, actually... He is a little too thick. I have such a difficult time drawing Kinger. I envy those that can draw Kinger. Zubal's worse. Oh my gosh. I don't know what else. I don't know what to say here other than just show my process, so I'm just gonna ramble. Zubal is so freaking hard for me to draw. I don't know why. Their head is annoying. Just angling it? That was like one of the hardest parts of that one storyboard, was like trying to figure out Zubal's head. And then, yeah, I'll do... And I don't make it perfect. Like, I'm not gonna bother to try and connect all the lines and stuff. So, fellow YouTuber, if you're an artist, what TADC character is hardest for you to draw? And if you don't draw TADC characters, what is just hard for you to draw in general? To answer actually, you can answer both of those questions if you want. But for me, I would say Zubal is the hardest for me to draw. Pomni was at one point, but I've drawn her enough, I think, that it doesn't really... Like, I've just figured out how to draw her. I don't know how I don't know how you draw a bucket. So pretend that looks good. And a lot of this, like, I just gauge with my eye. Like, I think he could go a little bit higher. Like, right there. I don't know why I said right there. But I did. And there's nothing you can do about it. Mwahaha. See, this is where I'm fighting against my hand. And against the natural rhythm of my movement. Which is what you don't want to do. Eat it up, eat it up. This line is bothering me. Then what I do, I have this layer, so I'll use this layer, I do have a specific color I use for this, but I don't want to go get it, I'm too lazy. But I use kind of like an off-white for some reason, just because I can. And then I go through the drawing and I just outline it, because I can't do the color fill option. Now, you could, technically what you could do with that is just connect all of the lines. And you only have to really worry about the outside ones. And then reference that. And wow, that's a lot quicker. I just discovered a hack for myself. And then just delete that layer. Guys, I'm learning things! This is a tutorial where everyone gets to learn. But anyways, that's how I storyboard. And then I guess I could do a little bit of like background. So typically I use something like this for the background. I definitely don't use full black. I don't think I've ever used full black for like background stuff, but if I have, I might have when I was first storyboarding. But to kind of put less focus on the background, you're going to want to use more like colors that are close to each other and samey, because the black line art really makes your main focusing point stand out more, whereas like this and then this back here, like it blends more into the background better. But what I would do for backgrounds, I think, is like the circus is in shambles, so we'll do some of the void. That just looks like a really jank cross. Don't worry about it. That also looks like a really jank cross. That even looks worse. I don't know how to draw the void. Just like, yeah. And then for certain things that are gonna be like, usually when something's closer to the camera, I will do a darker color, but when something's further away, like if I have something like in the main focus, like actually I do kind of picture that being like that. So here's how I would color this. Because I picture this, okay, well that's a little too dark, but I could reference this one. So something like that. Then this other stuff. Oops. This is just how I do things. And it isn't, I'm not gonna worry about what's behind Kinger, but usually you kind of maybe want to be worried about what's behind. Because I've done that way too many times where I'll do this strategy and then like, oh, I have to move Kinger, and then it doesn't look good. So then I have to fix it. E A A B A E A E A A B A A. Why is it doing that? Oh, Oh, that's why. That's good. That's on a separate layer, actually.
Time.
Yeah, so if anything connects, like this. Okay. This connects color-wise, so I'll have it on a separate layer, so I can edit stuff easier. But yeah, this is basically that you've just watched how I make a frame in an animatic. And then I'll load this with a bunch of frames for the animatic. And then when it gets too much for my brain, like there's some animatic there's some animatic projects that I have that have like 100 plus frames in them, or like layers. Not frames. They have like 100 plus layers. And it's usually like a couple to a few scenes. It depends. But yeah. And don't be afraid to like reuse scenes. I do notice that TADC tends to not reuse camera angles, so I try and implement that in my animatics. They cut camera angles a lot. Like they use a lot of different. They'll use like close to, but they won't use a lot of like the same shot. Kind of like how movies do. Like, you know how they'll cut from one actor to a different actor to the same actor to a different actor and whatnot. TADC does not do that. They do a lot of different angles, a lot of different camera shots, and a lot of perspectives. So yeah, just and I'm nerdy enough about the show, like I recognize stuff like that. But yeah, that's really all I can help you out with. I don't know what specifically. I'm trying to think what else would be. I think that's it. I mean, I guess I could talk through the process of like how I just do a recording, but usually that just starts with, what'll happen is I'll have an idea, then I go into my closet, and then I just ramble through it. Honestly, that's what I do. I just ramble through it, and then if I have different ideas, I'll go back in my closet, I'll re-record stuff, then I'll edit it, and, you know, just a lot of times, especially with the bigger animatics. First animatic was like just luck, the first TADC storyboard, cause that I did not have to edit that hardly at all. But then every other animatic or every other storyboard after that was like, gotta go back and re-record this, gotta go back and redo that. I had a new idea, so I'm gonna change that. Like, it was a lot of like trial and error. And I don't know if it was just because at that point I was overthinking it a lot, but yeah, this is how I make the animatics. I go in the closet, I ramble, I edit it down a lot usually, because I won't shut up. And then I start storyboarding, and then if I think of anything new or different that I actually want to implement, I'll go back into the closet and re-record. And sometimes I'll just export that little part, that little segment, and then sometimes if I change enough, I'll just export the entire thing again. So that's how I do things. Yay!